Marjorie was...
Hold on, say that again. Go ahead.
What?
So, Marjorie, go ahead.
Marjorie, of course, was stuck with Janine and I a lot. So she was really the closest to us. And she was very popular. I mean, a lot of people, all the kids in the neighborhood, her age, you know, she had a big group that ran around together. And she was very pretty, very popular. She was a bigger frame person than Janine and I or Henrietta. She was more built like the Oldfields, because they were bigger frame people. And I remember her being a really good artist in school. She did a lot of portraits. I don't know whether it was of people or whether it was just pictures she had seen or what, but she just did drawings, portraits. So, and then she stayed at our house. After she got married, she stayed. Now, Henrietta got married in our house. Don't remember about Margie. Where did she get married, in church or at a house?
Church.
Trying to think of what church she got married at. I don't think she got married at, you know what? I don't remember. I'll have to think about that one. But that was during the war, because Larry was in the service at that time. And Betty had come home because Jack was in the service, and she had Johnny, so she came back to, when he went in the service, they must have sold their house. Or they rented it, I'm not sure. But Betty came to Lexington and lived with Johnny. And so Margie was there. We used to play cards a lot. We played Tripoli, and we played with macaroni. So we'd have this big jar of macaroni that we only used for playing this, and these friends of Jack and Betty's that used to live next door to him on Columbia Avenue, they used to come up and play with us. So then he was drafted. He got killed over there. So there's a lot of good memories of that, you know, just everybody living in the house, you know, again, during the war. So.
How about Aunt Janine?
Aunt Janine was, I would say, just like me, but different. We have different memories on different things. Like I was telling you last night, I remember Mom making beef roast every Sunday. Actually, we had neighbors that lived 2 houses down that he worked with my dad, and their name was McClure. And they had 2 boys. Well, they moved away. Actually, it was that house that we looked at the other day on Lexington. They lived there. And they moved away from the neighborhood after a while. Well, every Sunday, they would show up just about dinner time. I don't think Mom invited them, although she always had enough for anyone that came. I think she just expected them. And they were good friends. I mean, Mom and Dad did a lot with them, you know, when they lived there and played cards and stuff. But I remember Mom fixing a big beef roast with potatoes and carrots and onions, and, you know, she always had bread and pie, and then I don't remember broccoli or cauliflower back then at all. But there was beans and corn and carrots and turnips, and I don't remember the squashes either. But there was always a big Sunday dinner. And I remember it being beef. Janine remembers it being pork. So there you go. What it was, I'm sure it was beef.
So you two were born the year of the Great Depression.
29. Yeah. Yeah, and a nickel was, we got that to go to the movies once a week. if we were bad and Dad gave it to us, no, they would give us a nickel to go to the movies. But, I mean, you could buy, well, when Jack worked at Kroger's, he used to bring day-old bread home, and he'd pass it out to the neighborhood. You know, we'd take what we wanted, and he'd pass it out to the neighborhood. And any other thing that he, you know, would bring home they were just going to throw away, he would bring it home, because we had WPA then. That's when they did our street. The WA put that in. The rubber bowl was built by WPA. The Mr. Snell that lived next door to us, he worked for WPA. So there was no shame in anything, because everybody was in the same boat, you know. Everybody tried to get work and worked as much as they could. So, but, you know, back then a nickel was a lot of money. I mean, today, what would it be, you know? It's amazing to think how different it is.
Did you ever feel like the family went without?
No. Mom always made something out of nothing. But we would have, I mean, for a main meal, macaroni and cheese. We'd come home from school, and Mom would send us up to the hunky store to get a chunk of Longhorn cheese, and when we'd come back, she'd have the macaroni cooked, and, you know, she always made something different from my dad, because my dad just liked meat and potatoes. So, you know, he wouldn't eat that stuff. Spanish rice was another thing we had, and you didn't have anything to go with it. You had maybe applesauce, or she made a gingerbread that she made a sauce for over it that was really good. And we used to get our milk from the country, and there was cream on top, so she'd make whipped cream. So we'd have this gingerbread with this, like a butterscotch sauce and whipped cream on that, which was good. Always had canned peaches that she had done, or canned cherries. So that's, you know, none of us starved. We always had bread. I don't remember eating a lot of oatmeal. Cream of wheat, yeah, I remember that. I didn't care for any of that cooked cereal back then. But Mom would fix it. We had grapefruit, I remember. We'd have eggs, soft-boiled egg, and you'd just break it and let it stand up there, and you take the top off of it, and you dunk cut your toast, you know, pieces, and dunk it in there. I get hungry for that every once in a while.
So did Grandpa ever give you any advice that you remember?
No, but one funny thing about him is he could never tell Janine and I apart. And he called us twin. I don't remember him ever calling me by name. It was always twin. Even when Janine, either that or he didn't call us a name, you know, he just waited till we looked at him or something and said something. When I got married 5 years before Janine did, so, but even when she moved down to Canton, we both had this red coat, winter coat. And so this one day I had it on over there, and so he thought I was Janine, you know, but he didn't want to take a chance, so he called me twin. Because Janine was living in Canton at the time. So, yeah. So then when he got sick, he was in his early 50s. And he thought he just had a sore back. He didn't want to go to a doctor. He went to a chiropractor. And finally, a chiropractor sent him to a surgeon. And then they must have done a colonoscopy. I don't know what they did back then. But they found out he had colon cancer. And the doctor operated on him, and Yeah, that was the early 50s. And they didn't take, yeah, he did have a colostomy. And they said they couldn't get it all. It had gone down into the lymph nodes in his legs. So they gave him like 6 months to a year to live, but he lived 7 years. So that had to have been 53 when that happened, because he died in 60, September of 60. And Jack had taken him up to Point Barrow. Kurt Melvin was married to Verona Fulford, and he drove a private plane for Firestone. So he was able to rent a plane and take Dad up there so that he didn't have to go through the ride. But that summer he got sick while he was up there, and he was in the hospital in Meaford from June until Labor Day. And we went up, and I was up there at the time, I think, because I called and said, I think it's time we got Dad home. So Dale Cawthorn and Jimmy came up in a station wagon. They put a single bed mattress in the back of the station wagon, and they put Dad in there, and they got permission or prescriptions from the hospital to stop on the way home at certain hospitals. They had called ahead so that they could give him shots so he could stand the trip. And he really wanted to come home in the worst way, but they ended up taking him right to the hospital when they got home. They didn't bring him to Lexington. And so he was in the hospital like a week before he died. So, and where he's buried now is, every time we would go to Canada, we would go by this cemetery, and he would say, now there, when I die, there's where I want to be buried, because this is like being on the way to Canada. So that's where we bought the lots when he died. So there was something else back there I was going to say. Questions?
So what was winter like in Akron, in the house?
Well, we had a coal furnace. So when you got up in the morning, it was cold. You got up, Dad would get up and stoke the furnace, but it was something that had to be done all day. He would do it in the morning, but Mom would have to, do it during the day, and I don't really remember shoveling coal in there. But we had in the basement, we had, the fruit cellar was on one end, and there was a coal cellar on the other. Of course, when they dumped that coal in your coal cellar, that soot from that coal would go all through the house, right through all the cracks. That's why they had to do fall and spring cleaning all the time. Today you don't have to do that, where back then, twice a year, you went through and you cleaned all your walls and your ceilings and everything, because you either got the dirt from burning the coal or the dust from it going in the bin, and then shoveling it all the time. You were raising that dust. So it would be very cold in the morning. It was nothing to stand right over a heater. If you came in from outside and were cold, you had to stand right over the heater which they had coming right out of the sides of the wall. And there would be really nice heat coming out of there. So, but we had a lot of hot chocolate, and we cooked a lot of popcorn. We had great Christmases, as I recall. Jack got us a pair of roller skates one time, so we spent the day in the basement roller skating through the basement. It had a cement floor. And I remember Mom and Dad got us Janine and I, a little oven that baked. It was electric. And so we would cooked dinners, potatoes and baked cakes. I mean, just little stuff, you know. But we only got one because we had to share everything, you know. I mean, things were tight. So what we got for Christmas were pajamas and underwear and maybe one or two toys. And we got one tricycle that we shared. We had a wagon that we shared. I never had a big bike to ride. Never had one. But we had a tricycle. So, but we had good Christmases, and Dad always had a fancy. They might had some really nice cut glass, and he had like a wine decanter, and they always had wine in that. I remember Janine and I walking up to Kroger's, which was past where you went today to Collingwood. It was another 4 blocks, and there was a Kroger store then. That wasn't the one Jack worked in. That was a different time. But this was Saturday night, or maybe it was a Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. I don't know, but there had to have been at least 8 inches of snow on the ground, and it was snowing when we were walking. Not real hard, but it was snowing. And we walked up there to Kroger's. My dad bought a duck because he liked duck for Thanksgiving. So my mom had already gotten a turkey. So we took the duck home for Mom to fix for him. So, but I remember just clear as day, Dad and Janine and I walking up there. He walked really, really fast. So we did too, you know, to keep up with him because he just didn't know how to walk slow. So I remember going to school in snow and rain. We didn't have a car, so you know, we never got a ride anyplace. We had a girl we went to school with that lived up the street from us, and her mom, she was an only child. Her mom took her to school every day, Gloria Delude. So Janine and I would try and time it. This is when we were going to North, and we had to walk quite a ways to North and Jennings. So we would try and time it so we'd be there about the time they would leave in the morning. Well, we would be maybe within 2 houses of them, and they'd pull out the driveway and go. Like, they wouldn't even look, you know. And I always thought, you know, if I lived there and I knew that they were going to school, I would at least look up the street to see if I could see them. But they never did. We got a ride a couple of times. If we were right there at the driveway when they were leaving, we would get a ride. Otherwise, we walked. I mean, I don't remember carrying an umbrella. We just got wet or, you know, wore boots. And then they had post boxes, you know, mailboxes all over that you could put your mail in. They don't have those anymore because of 9/11 or whatever. So one winter right after Jimmy and I were married, Aunt Rena and Uncle Cecil were visiting. And we woke up the next morning. This might have been a Thanksgiving weekend too. We woke up the next morning and there was like 4 foot of snow on the street. Everything was closed. Jimmy was working for the city. So they even sent a truck out to pick him up. And this is when he was going to Kent State after he was in the service. And they sent a truck out to pick him up so that he could go and work. But you could walk right down the middle of the street, Lexington, Cuyahoga Falls Avenue. No cars were on the road, you know. So we had some pretty good winters.
So I know you talked to me once about when you were young, some of the summers you spent in Canada when you were really young. What are some of your memories of the first summer that you spent up there?
I don't really remember my grandmother Oldfield. I don't know whether I ever saw her alive. I remember her picture. I just don't remember seeing her alive. She died very young. She was like 54. So I do remember that when they went up to her funeral, that Janine and I stayed with Aunt Elsie. This is Aunt Elsie and Uncle Harry, Dad's cousin. So we stayed over there with them while they went up. I think we were like 6 years old or something. And Aunt Elsie took us to the beauty parlor with her, which we had never been to before. And we had fun with that. And we knew, where they were and when they'd be back. So we were old enough to not really miss them. I don't remember missing them. But then when we were 8 years old, Aunt Lizzie had a cook that had her gallbladder out. So she needed someone else to fill in for a couple of months. So she wrote my mom a letter. I don't remember, telephone, or sent her a wire. Maybe she sent her a telegram and asked her to come up and cook at the hotel for a couple of months while her cook healed. So I think my dad encouraged her, and so Mom went up and took Janine and I. I think it took us like 24 hours to get there on the bus. I remember it was a long, long ride. And we stayed at the hotel then for a couple of months. And Mom cooked, and Janine and I would just play by the water or visit with the guests. And, we'd sing and they'd give us $1. And back then they had guides, and they'd take these people in different places. Like they'd go down to the Ojibwe and buy bananas. There was a Indian reservation right next to the Ojibwe, and they sold like birch canoes and little birch jewel boxes and stuff like that. So we always had our dollars we had gotten, so we could go over there and buy something. We fished a lot, I remember that. After the cook came back, then Mom decided to go up to Manitoulin Islands because that's where her younger brother, Uncle Freeman, that summer, because he was at war with his dad over something. So he went up and fished with another family up on Manitoulin Islands, which is the freshest, which is the only freshwater island in the world, or the largest freshwater island in the world. It's beautiful up there. If you ever get to go, go. And so Aunt Mabel and Uncle Freeman had built even a room on their house for us to come. And so Mom and Janine and I went up there and stayed for, like a month or something. And my dad was helping my brother work on his car. And the story as I heard it was that they were working on the radiator or the belt or something, and so Jack said to my dad, well, I'm going to go in and start the car. You look and see if such and such a thing is working. Well, I guess when Jack went around to get in the car, my dad said, well, wait a minute, but Jack didn't hear him. So when Jack started up the car, my dad had his hand in around the fan belt, and it cut the ends of 2 fingers off. So that letter was written up to my uncle, but a little tamer letter was written to the point to my mom. But we happened to be at Manitoulin Islands when Uncle Freeman got his letter. So we got the worst letter first. So of course then my mom wanted to come home, so we came home. But it took us a long time to get home because we had to take a ferry boat over to the main island and then come by bus.
Hold on one second.
Are we okay?